What's up, guys? Today we will be talking about the top 5 best iPhones in that $300 price range, and we're going to start off with the iPhone 10. So this is still an excellent pick, still one of my favorite iPhones to get if you're just looking for an older flagship. So this has a glass back, and then you also have stainless steel frame on here with an IP67 dust and water resistant. This phone still has a pretty good display. It's still got a Super Retina OLED display. It's HDR10 and it's a 5.8-inch display with a resolution of 1125 by 2436 and 458 for the PPI. So overall, it's a very sharp and bright display and gives off good colors. The best thing about this phone is it's running iOS 15. So this phone should get iOS 16, if not 17. It still runs extremely well. You do have the Apple A11 chip on here, which does fine for day-to-day tasks, multitasking. It does fine with gaming, just casual gaming. So it's still a fairly, pretty powerful phone. You do have on here 64 gigs of internal storage and 3 gigs of RAM on the base model. You also have stereo speakers, which sound pretty good. You get a pretty good depth with the bass, and you also have NFC on here with Apple Pay, and Face ID is on here, and it still works very fast, so I have no issues with that. So the iPhone 10 does have some pretty good cameras. I guess for 300 bucks, I wasn't really complaining about the cameras. It's a 12 megapixel standard and a 12 megapixel telephoto. The only thing you would really miss is having an ultra wide lens on here, since that's one of the most popular secondary cameras. You do have a 4K video, 2430 or 60 FPS, and then you have a 7 megapixel selfie that shoots in 1080p. And I thought the images were pretty good. For the price, you get good detail, especially if you are in good light. You can definitely get a very good shot out of the iPhone 10. I still think it has some pretty good video, very smooth, very nice looking video as well. So this phone does have a 2716 milliamp battery, 15-watt charging along with wireless charging as well. Basically, you can easily squeeze about 5 hours and 30 minutes of screen on time, but again, it varies on your battery health. You can get better than that, around 6 hours if you have 100%, but it really varies on the battery health of the phone. But in general, this phone was able to get through a day for me, no problem. Alright, guys, next we got the iPhone SE. This is still a very good option, and it's actually a little bit cheaper now at around $289, so it's gotten definitely cheaper. All those links will be down below, and this is great for anybody who wants a smaller compact phone. It is a glass and metal design. It's basically the iPhone 8 body on here. It's IP67 dust and water resistant. You also have a 4.7-inch IPS Retina display on here, and it's a 720p plus display, 326 for the PPI. So basically, it's a pretty decent display. It gets fairly bright. It's still pretty sharp, and I don't have any issues with it. There's no notch or cutout on here, but you do get kind of like these chunky bezels. But you also have on here iOS 15, and the highlight with this phone is it's extremely fast. It has the Apple A13 chip, basically a flagship chipset in this phone, and it doesn't miss a beat when it comes to speed, when it comes to gaming. It games at the highest settings. And yeah, it's just an overall very powerful phone. It's 64 gigs of internal storage and 3 gigs of RAM. You also have on here NFC, and your Touch ID is on board here, and it works very fast. A lot of people also prefer just having a home button with Touch ID. So this phone does have a pretty good camera setup, but the one thing about it is it's only one single lens, so it's a 12 megapixel standard, no telephoto, no ultra wide. You do have 4K video at 2430 or 60 FPS, and then a 7 megapixel selfie at 1080p. Basically, this takes some pretty good photos. It's probably one of the best in at this price range. Just really good color accuracy, very good detail. The video on here is really solid as well. I really like the selfie cam. So overall, for cameras, it's still got a really good camera, but again, it's just a single camera. You do have on here a 1821 milliamp battery, 18-watt charging with wireless charging. Basically, this phone is not going to give you that good of battery life. It's not going to give you all day battery life. You're looking at around maybe 4 hours and 30 minutes of screen on time, depending on how you use it, but definitely battery life is just going to be okay. Next is going to be the iPhone 8 Plus, and these are still going for exactly around 300 bucks. So basically, it's kind of like the iPhone SE, but it's not as powerful, but it's just bigger, right? And you get an extra camera. So this phone has pretty much the same design, glass back, aluminum frame, IP67 dust and water resistant. It's an IPS panel at 5.5 inches. It is a full 1080p panel, 401 for the PPI. Overall, it's a very, good looking panel. And like I said, it's bigger. So if you wanted something like the SE, but bigger, this would be ideal. You have iOS 15 on here with the Apple A11 chip. And overall, this phone is still extremely fast. Again, it's not going to game at the highest settings like the SE, but overall, it's going to do fine performance wise. I didn't really have any issues with it. So you do have on here 64 gigs of internal storage and 3 gigs of RAM on here. You actually have some pretty nice sounding stereo speakers on here, as well as NFC. And also, if you're a fan of the Touch ID or the home button, this is on here for you, and that works really great. On here you do have a triple camera setup, a 12 megapixel standard, a 12 megapixel telephoto, 4K video at 60, 30, or 24 FPS, and then a 7 megapixel selfie at 1080p. The iPhone 8 Plus surprisingly takes some excellent photos still. I was really happy with image quality. The telephoto is pretty nice. So as you can see from the stills, it does a really good job with detail, color. I mean, I was just really impressed. The only, area where these phones fall short, the older iPhones, is in low light conditions. They all kind of just get a little grainy and the detail is just not as good. But other than that, they all do a pretty good job still. So you do have on here a 2691 milliamp battery, and battery life is going to be much better on this device here. So we do have 15-watt charging, wireless charging. I actually did a drain test if you guys want to check that out, but again, it varies on your battery health. You can easily squeeze 6 hours of screen on time out of this phone. So next is the iPhone XR. This is still a very good option, and it also comes in some really cool colors as well too. So this phone is a glass back, aluminum frame, IP67 dust and water resistant. You do have a 6.1 inch display. It is still a 720p plus display, 326 for the PPI. Still a very good display. As you can see, it's got the more modern looking iPhone design with the notch and stuff like that. So you do have on here iOS 15 with the Apple A12 chip, which is still pretty powerful. This chipset will be able to pretty much do anything you throw at it, multitasking, bouncing in and out of applications. Gaming is going to be really good on here. 64 gigs of internal storage and 3 gigs of RAM is on here. You do have stereo speakers on here as well as NFC. Face ID is going to be on board, and you do have on here, and again, this is the weird thing with this phone. It does have a 12 megapixel standard, but that's it. It's only that, so it doesn't have an ultra wide or a telephoto. It does have 4K video, 24, 30, or 60 FPS with a 7 megapixel selfie at 1080p. From what I've seen, the XR still takes pretty good photos. Again, it's the same thing. If you in good lighting, excellent. Take it out of good lighting, it's just kind of okay. So basically, like I said, the only weird thing is it's just a single lens. You have a pretty nice sized battery at 2,942 milliamp battery with 15-watt charging, wireless charging. This is honestly around the iPhone 8 Plus, and again, depending on your battery health, you can easily squeeze 6 hours all day battery life out of this phone, and again, that is going to vary. So the XR is still a really good choice to pick up. All right, next is going to be the most expensive on the list, and the iPhone XS is going to be at around 363. So that's the cheapest that I've found it, and again, those links will be down below. Basically very similar to the iPhone 10. If you can afford this, I would get this one, but you have the same design, glass back, stainless steel frame, but this one has IP68 dust and water resistant, and on this one you do have a Super Retina OLED display. It's HDR10 as well, so slightly better display on the iPhone XS. 5.8 inches, and again, it is a 1080p plus panel, 458 for the PPI. So it's a really nice looking panel. So overall, no issues. Bright great colors, deep blacks. It has iOS 15 and the Apple A12 chip. Basically, this phone is going to be updated again for years and years to come. A lot of these phones are still going to be getting updates for years to come, because we're looking at the iPhone 7. The iPhone 7 could potentially get iOS 16. So these phones have a long way to go as far as longevity. So we do have the Apple A12 chip, which is going to do great with opening your applications, scrolling, bouncing in and out of stuff, gaming. You're going to have an excellent time with that. You also have 64 gigs of internal storage, 4 gigs of RAM, stereo speaker setup on here, NFC, Face ID is on board, and then on here you do have a dual camera setup, a 12 megapixel standard and a 12 megapixel telephoto, 4K video, 60, 30, or 24 FPS, along with a 7 megapixel selfie cam, and that shoots in 1080p at 60 or 30 as well. So basically, again, you're going to get better photos in the iPhone 10. So I think this would be second in line. I still think the SE kind of took better stills to me than the XS or the 10s. But again, I kind of go back and forth. But I prefer this one because it has the telephoto lens. So I do think this is going to be the overall best camera that you can get for that $300 price range. You do have on here a 2658 milliamp battery with 15-watt charging and wireless charging. Again, this phone is going to do perfectly fine. You easily be able to get 6 hours of screen on time depending on your battery health. So that is pretty much it, guys. This pretty much wraps this list up. Be sure to let me know what you guys think, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.